So about a month ago, there was a story, an upsetting story that came out of Houston, Texas, that seems to have been consumed over the other news stories that came out since that time. And it almost feels like this very earth-shattering story has been swept under the rug and we've already forgot about something monumental that happened in the world of sports. You see, a month ago, the Houston Astros were caught stealing signs from their opponents, ultimately tainting the World Series victories, ultimately compromising the integrity of the players and the management that run that operation. Yes, for those that are not aware, there was a major scandal that was broken out just under a month ago, detailing how the Houston Astros went above and beyond the code of ethics in the world of baseball to gain an upper hand on their opponents. So it is definitely part of America's pastime, right? It is inherent within the game that if you can pick up on what your opponents are doing, so kudos to you, right? So sometimes a pitcher might have a tell. Sometimes the signs are easily identifiable. So if you can do that with your own naked eye, faddal, it's fair game, do what you gotta do. However, the Houston Astros went so far as to set up an entire operation where they digitally were surveilling and monitoring through TV screens what the opponents were doing, and then the players in the dugout would communicate that information to the players on the field so that they had first-hand knowledge of what to expect. And you might think that this talk is going to be about how cheating never prospers and about how it'll always catch up to you, and no matter how much you try, but when you live in the world of a cheater, it's not sustainable. It's not what I want to talk about. You might also be wondering if maybe today is going to be a time where I'll talk about how cheating and wrongdoing ultimately has consequences. And so for those that have read the reports, not only were the current manager and GM fired from their jobs, but there were other managers from other teams who had ties to the Houston Astros scandal from years prior, namely Carlos Beltran, newly named manager of the New York Mets, who will no longer be the manager of the New York Mets, and current coach manager Alex Cora of the Boston Red Sox. He too was fired. And so you might think I'm going to walk you through a demonstration about how actions have consequences and we should learn how we should avoid wrongdoing. It's not what I want to talk about today either. Instead, I'd like to get into the mind of somebody who commits wrong, specifically through the framework of the Houston Astros, because some players have already been interviewed. And I watched a few of them myself. And I sat and I watched how Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve, when pressed by the reporters, are you ashamed of what you did? Do you feel any guilt? Do you feel any wrong in what you did? You know what they said? No. Major League Baseball did their report. It is what it is. We're going to move on from it. Not a single piece of regret. Not a single form of apology. They wouldn't even verbalize the wrong that they did. And so I'm wondering, how could it be that they're getting pressed by these interviewers and they can't even get to a place, forget about apology, but they can't even get to a place where they can recognize the truth about what went on. They just want to move on, play baseball, and forget that this has all happened. You know, in a very sad and weird way. Kobe Bryant passing away was one of the greatest things that ever happened to the Houston Astros, because nobody is talking about them and everybody forgot about what they did and the scandal that was broken out just under a month ago. And so I think it's important for us to really get into the mindset of what happens when we commit wrong. What does it mean to do wrong? Because we're all human beings. We're all placed into these positions in life where we're in these situations. And so I think it's important for us to unpack and to recognize what the story out of Houston, Texas might ultimately mean for us, and how we can learn from it and how it can enhance the lives that we live. So the first thing I feel like we need to do is we need to understand and identify what it means to do wrong. So we'll take from the Hebrew word het, right? Sin literally means off mark. There are boundaries that are set up for us to be our best selves. And so sometimes we either say things or do things that force us or move us outside of those boundaries of what is within our best self. And so that's what it literally means. You've done something that's just off mark. Tomorrow's a new day. Hopefully you'll shoot and aim better the next time. That's literally what it means. But here is the problem when it comes to recognizing the wrong that I did. You see, we're very, very convincing people. We know exactly what to say to ourselves in order to convince ourselves that the wrong that we did isn't really so wrong. Because it's much better to feel like the actions that I do and the life that I live is a beautiful, awesome, real good life. I don't want to deal with the reality and the heartache and the pain that maybe there's something that I'm doing that's off and that's wrong, and then all of a sudden I start feeling guilty. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. So there's things that we say and there's things that we convince ourselves by. So we'll say things like, really what I did, it wasn't so wrong. If you really think about it, it's okay. It's not that bad. Or we'll go so far as to say, you know what? I'm already a bad guy. I might as well just stick with what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is bad. So what's the point, right? And so we do a very good job of creating this false narrative of recognizing that what I am doing isn't really so. And so I'd like to now discuss what exactly we should be doing. And here's the message, right? And it's not a new message. We've said this many times before. We do the right thing simply because it is the right thing to do. And it sounds good on paper, and it's something that really sounds very easy to do. But I'm wondering just how easy it is. Because you know what, boys? If we're going to be real with one another, you know what? It's really hard. It's not so easy just to do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. Namely because we're not always aware of the things that we do, whether or not they are on mark or off mark. And so that creates a problem for us. And when we're ignorant and when we're not fully in control of the knowledge that allows us to know if we are our best selves, it ultimately compromises our ability to do the right thing and to do what we think is best. And so here's what I'm wondering. Because when I was a kid, there were certainly things that I did that were wrong, and there were certainly things that I did that I wasn't ultimately proud of. But you know what? When I think about it, those aren't things that I do today. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, and I'm not saying that everything that I do is best, and every single human being is in process, and we're always trying to evolve and improve who we are and how we operate. But here's what I've learned over time. That as we acquire knowledge and as we become more informed, it allows me to better gauge as to whether or not the actions that I make and the things that I say and do are either on the mark or off the mark. And it's up to us to recognize and to learn as we go on and we navigate our lives. So here's what I'm just trying to consider and think about as we talk about some of the things that we say to ourselves and the things that we do here in this classroom. When it comes to how we interact with the world around us, and we engage in maybe things like Lashon Hara, do we justify to ourselves and we say, well, you know what? That person was mean to me, so it's fair game for me to talk trash about them? Or how about when it comes to with our teachers? Do we say things like, well, that teacher is mean and that teacher is insensitive, or that teacher doesn't really know how to teach, so yeah, it's fair game for me to be disrespectful in their class? Or how about with a friend or with a peer? I find this person to be annoying, so yeah, I'm not going to include them in plans, or I'm not going to do things that maybe I would have done if I was really close with that person. I want to know if these are the questions that we are asking ourselves. Are we truly our best selves, or are we living in a world of fabrication? Are we living in a world where we convince ourselves of something that really is not? And here's the reality. It's hard to always be on the mark, and it's expected, and we know through time and tribulations that, yeah, we're going to shoot and we're going to miss sometimes. It happens. We're not always on the mark. That doesn't define who you are. You want to know what makes a difference between a really good person and somebody who's not? It's not about whether you hit the mark or not. It's about, can I recognize the fact that I missed, and what am I willing to do now that I know that I've missed? And so here's what I would love to propose for this class. I'm not saying anybody in this room has to be perfect, and I'm not saying that everybody has to always be on point with what we do. But as we navigate life, and as we grow, and as we acquire more knowledge, and as we become more informed as to whether or not what I do and what I say is on mark or off mark, from me being my best self, I'm wondering, maybe, just maybe, if we can be a bit vulnerable, if we can be a bit honest, and recognize, you know what, today wasn't the best day. I maybe said things, I maybe did things that doesn't truly allow me to reflect me being my best self. You want tomorrow to be a better day? You really want to move on from the wrongdoing and from the things that we do that ultimately we regret? No problem. Start by recognizing that a spade is a spade. Start by saying to myself, this is what I did. It falls outside of the boundary lines, and I'm not proud and I'm not happy, but you know what? Tomorrow's another day to shoot. Tomorrow is another day to be on target. Tomorrow is another day for me to be the person that I ultimately want to be. Shabbat shalom.